Hi, everyone, and happy Pentecost. You know, it would be nice to say that the problems in the church stopped after Pentecost, after the winds came and the flames were seen, and people spoke in tongues, and they had the Spirit among them. But the problem is, we know it didn't stop, and that tells us something important: that we still have freedom. The Spirit counsels, comforts, guides, and inspires us, but the Spirit does not control us. We receive all these things only to the extent that we're open to receiving what the Spirit offers and then choosing to follow what it has given to us. Now, one of the troubles were the conflicts, as I mentioned last week, between the Orthodox folks and the Hellenists. The Orthodox wanted the Christians to follow all the dietary laws and rituals, and the Hellenists were okay with letting them go and letting Gentiles into the church and things like this. And when the meals were being distributed to the widows of the church, there were apparently unequal portions being given out. The Hellenist widows noticed that they were being slighted. They were receiving less food, less support. Now, that is not an attractive picture, that people would push their agenda by making people go hungry. Unfortunately, it's been done ever since then for political or religious reasons. The apostles were frustrated by being asked to address this situation. As a church pastor, I've sometimes found that story to be funny. Not that it's funny when disputes arise in the church, but it's so incredibly human, and people are acting somewhat the same in today's world. The apostles are amusing to me. Oh, they don't want to get involved in administration, and so 7 others are designated to take care of it. An outsider might describe it that they wanted to spend all their time on PR work and let someone else sweep the hallway and shuffle the papers. Gets even funnier by irony, because those 7 do their jobs well. It was a job in an area of service that desperately needed to be done. But then at least 2 of them also managed to do dynamic PR work. Stephen is such a good preacher that he ends up under a pile of rocks, sadly. And Philip's exploits are given even more time in Acts than most of the rest of the apostles combined. Only Peter and later Paul will get more attention. This is the Philip who, in the book of Acts, we heard the angel telling him, "Get up and go toward the south to the road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza." Now, this was a wilderness road. It couldn't have been a safe place to show up alone. Bandits sometimes preyed on travelers, and there was always the threat of wild animals. And then, too, what about food and supplies? All those things that we think of when we go traveling in those kinds of situations. Besides, what point was there in going into the wilderness? Now, much of the time, I believe that God speaks to us in ways that our logic can understand. God really does speak most of the time in ways, okay, that makes sense to us. We are to love God with heart, soul, strength, and also with our minds. God gave us the ability to use our reason for a purpose. We are not called to acts of reckless bravado or to test our courage in pointless pursuits. But once in a while, there may be something to which we are called that doesn't make immediate sense. And so it was with Philip that day. The message was clear and unmistakable. Go. He went. He encountered a man from Africa. Now, we don't know the name of this man. We know that he was an Ethiopian. He was a eunuch who had been an official in the queen's court. There is some debate on the subject, yet it seems likely that he may have been a eunuch in the full sense of the word, physically mutilated, and that there was something obvious about this for Philip to know. The man was a high official. If he had begun as a slave, he still had risen to a status of great importance. In fact, he had the freedom and resources to make that long trip from his home in Africa so that he could worship in Jerusalem. Most likely he was what was known as a God-fearer. He was a Gentile who worshipped Yahweh, but had not converted in the full sense of following circumcision, dietary, and other ritual laws. He was, in fact, one of those whom the Orthodox Israelites and Orthodox Christians criticized the Hellenists and non-Orthodox Christians for associating with. And the truth is that this man from Africa could never have converted to Jerusalem according to Orthodox rules. His physical mutilation would have forever barred him from it. Nevertheless, it is clear that his faith was genuine. He had even taken a difficult and dangerous journey so he could worship Yahweh at the center of Israelite faith. Now he was returning home, and even as he traveled, he studied a scroll of Isaiah. Must have been an incredibly faithful and incredibly intelligent and dynamic individual. When Philip showed up, this guy was delighted to have an opportunity to learn even more. And this indicates that despite his position of power and importance, he was humble enough also to learn from others. And so he invited this Christian into his carriage, and Philip took the opportunity to use Isaiah as a leaping off point to talk about Jesus. They come across some water, and the Ethiopian says, "Well, what's to stop me from being baptized right now?" This man is, by the way, every pastor and evangelist's dream encounter. This is someone who's smart, who's curious, who's well-intentioned, and he doesn't sit on the fence. His faith is complete. Or his question to Philip may have had two levels to it, and one of them had to do with his readiness. What's to stop me? Right now, let's do it right now. But the other level had to do with the fact that as a eunuch, he could not be accepted into full fellowship of the Israelite faith, no matter how much he loved God. Now he's heard this wonderful good news about Jesus, and he had to have wondered whether he would be equally unacceptable to the Christians. What's to stop me from being baptized? I'm ready. I'm not stopping me. Are you going to stop me? And that was part of what his question was. And God bless Philip. He wasn't one of the 12. Peter would later represent the official church leadership's acceptance of Gentiles in his encounter with Cornelius. But there Philip is. He's on his own. He could have rejected this man. He could have sat on the fence. He could have said, well, I don't really know. I need to kind of check with others to find out if it's okay. He may have wanted to get away because perhaps as someone who was born into the Israelite faith and society, he felt emotionally uncomfortable to be around a eunuch. There were probably phobias attached to it, all kinds of problems. So Philip could have justified turning him away because he was a Gentile, because his life as a foreigner and as a eunuch was different, and because it was considered unacceptable by the average Orthodox citizen of Israel. He could have said, I'm just not ready to do this. I don't feel like I have the authority or anything of that sort. But instead, Philip was also ready. He was ready to go where the Spirit led him, even when it had made no sense to be there. And he was ready to speak and share good news with a stranger, with a foreigner. He was ready to baptize and accept, and then head off to the next area of service and love. In the seeking of God's will, we do have to study and pray and consider carefully. And sometimes we seriously need to consult with other people and not trust only our own perception and understanding of things. A lot of damage has been done in the world by those who act in God's name through violence or abuse of power or manipulation. Especially in today's world, We are very aware of this and leery of those who claim too much, and yet their actions, even as they claim to be speaking for God, their actions lie outside the sphere of loving deeds of mercy and justice to which God calls all people. If an action doesn't fit God's standard of justice, love, and mercy, then that should stop us in our tracks. If we genuinely sense that this is a good area of service, but not our particular calling, then that's okay. The body needs its various parts to accomplish everything to which it is called. As for the rest, the man asked, "What's to stop me?" He was ready to take the leap of faith. Philip was ready to do his part. So, what's to stop the world from being the place that God meant it to be? Hopefully, on this Pentecost and every day following, it won't be us stopping. Let's get ready and go. Amen.